Chapter 4. When I was at Belcarin, I had a professor named Treelogan. Eccentric, wore a bandana instead of a wizard's hat, long hair, barefoot, that sort of thing. Taught outside when he could. He had some interesting theories about the cultivation of soulfire. He thought certain practices could increase your capacity so you could cast more powerful magic before needing to rest. He taught a seminar on it, and it had to be held on the astronomy lawn because it was so popular. But the Academy admissions officers caught wind of this. They use soulfire capacity as a key metric and deny anyone with too little capacity automatically. So they didn't like this idea. I think their thinking went like this. If you can increase your soulfire, then someone with very little soulfire could increase their capacity to wizard level. And if that's true, then anyone can become a wizard, and the distinction between those who can do magic and those who can't becomes irrelevant. So the deans discontinued the seminar and dismissed Treelogan quietly. And that really got me thinking. Transcript from the streamcast Witch Talk, episode 342, with Master Wizard Allura. Ninian woke up the next morning invigorated by the possibility of unlocking the secrets of portalcraft, but also, if she had time, the opportunity to explore the nearby woods and meet the creatures who lived there. She dressed in her brown work overalls, donned her matching wizard's hat, and climbed the stairs with Gossamer to the lower workroom for coffee and a light breakfast. Was this tower the most comfortable place to live? No. Was Salagrix the ideal mentor? No. Was Black Gulch an engaging metropolis where she might explore and meet other young people and have edifying cultural experiences? No. But this was her apprenticeship, her 5th and final year at Belcarin, and she was going to make the most of it. Ninian finished her coffee and stood to examine the room, which was as damp and disorganized as it had been the day before. She set her jaw. If it was going to be her duty to keep the tower clean, then she would make it the cleanest tower in history. She rolled up her sleeves and got to work. A cleaning charm banished the fungus, for now, but Ninian had to enlarge the radius of her drying spell to account for the sheer amount of standing water on the floor. This adjustment made the spell less efficient and drained more of her soulfire than usual, which left her feeling tired and grumpy. The ingredient shelves were in total disarray. If there was any sort of organizational system here, it was opaque to her. As she cleaned up spilled containers, she arranged ingredients in groups by type on the floor. Gossamer helped by pushing jars around with his head. Before long, she realized that this was going to be a much larger project than expected. She was still on the floor, alphabetizing vials of mermaid tears, when Salagrix appeared in the doorway. "Is it afternoon already?" Ninian asked, exhausted and looking at the merely rearranged chaos.
"It is,"
said Salagrix, stepping into the room. A vortex of fungal spores swirled around him, redirtying Ninian's previously clean floor. Salagrix walked past one of the ingredient shelves on his way to the chalkboard, and a ceramic jar jumped toward him and fell to the floor, where it smashed and sent up a cloud of phoenix ashes. Ninian sighed and collapsed into the chair. Gossamer rose from his nap under the workbench and climbed up Ninian's leg for another nap. Salagrix looked around the room.
"A long way to go, I see,"
he said with a sniff. "Do you have my datastream device?" Ninian asked. Salagrix smacked his forehead.
Thank you for reminding me. I'll grab it for you before dinner. Fascinating machine. Quite extraordinary. Much appreciated."
Ninian could have guessed that the absent-minded wizard would have forgotten. What were a few more hours without it?
"Well, time to put up your feet. Let's continue from where we left off yesterday. Further foundational principles of portalcraft."
Yes, thought Ninian. Shaping the fabric of space, secrets of the universe. She grabbed her parchment and inkwand. The nub of chalk squeaked across the chalkboard as Salagrix launched into his lecture, picking up precisely where he had stopped. Ninian tried her best to follow along, she really did, but after a tiring morning she found her attention wavering. Besides all the unfamiliar words she had learned yesterday, which she had to keep referring to yesterday's notes to remind herself what they meant, there was a whole new crop of terms today. Several times, Salagrix uttered a sentence so crammed with specialized words, it turned to total mush in Ninian's brain. She also didn't have a sense of where any of this was going. There had not yet been a mention of any incantations, charms, glyphs, potions, or any of the practical magical steps to actually make a portal. Everything they had covered so far was pure theory. As it turned out, portalcraft was not like creature healing. She thought back to her days on Trantis and the briny smell of the nebula whales as she kept them moist. She thought back to her second-year lab with the rows of incubators with hydra mantises curled up inside, and how she would sometimes spend the night there just to be near them. Even before Belkarin, as a young girl in her homeworld of Swerk, she remembered a summer she spent observing a pearl ant nest and long afternoons just watching them march up and down a baynab tree.
That concludes our lecture for today. We will continue with principles of space folding tomorrow, but for now, enjoy your break before dinner.
Salagrix's announcement shook Ninian from her stupor. She rubbed her eyes, unsure of how much of the lecture she had missed. Don't forget my datastream device, Ninian called out to Salagrix.
Ah, yes, thank you.
The old wizard nodded. More ingredient jars spilled as he crossed the room, and their contents swirled up into his personal whirlwind. After Salagrix exited, Ninian examined the room to determine if it was any cleaner than it had been that morning. She decided for her sense of self-worth that it was, if only slightly. Oh well, she thought, I'll just start again in the morning. She had originally thought that the pre-dinner break would be the perfect time to explore the woods, but now she was tired and just wanted to lie in her bed without thinking about anything. At dinner, Salagrix had forgotten her device again.
I apologize. My memory isn't quite what it used to be, he said, taking his seat. Fascinating piece of technology, by the way. You may think me backwards for my commitment to portalcraft, but I can still learn a thing or two. And he jabbed his finger into his wrinkled forehead. I'll fetch it for you after dinner.
But what actually happened after dinner was that Salagrix ordered more pixie wine.
A toast, he said grandly, to the second day of your apprenticeship.
Ninian did not drink her wine, which meant she listened to Salagrix's rendition of a bawdy song from his academy days, fully sober. Eventually, he stumbled up the stairs, and Ninian went to bed, exhausted. The events of that second day settled into a routine for the rest. In the mornings, she cleaned the lower workshop, trying to keep ahead of the previous day's mess that followed Salagrix wherever he went. The afternoons were for lectures, and while she technically had a break before dinner to do with as she wished, so far she had been too exhausted to go explore the woods. Once she had gotten the ingredient shelves organized, as much as she could considering the effect of Salagrix's personal gravity, the source of which remained a mystery, she moved on to other projects to improve her quality of life in the tower. First was replacing the Fandulf's fire charm torches in the stairwell with her family's specialty lantern light spells. While not exactly homey, with care the tower shed much of the gloom she had encountered on her first day. No longer did the flickering flames seem to animate tiny figures in the shadows or fill the stairwell and rooms with smoke. Now the warm, consistent light cast the wall and floor stones in a cheery glow that made every surface look like a painting. Since none of the rooms had windows, save for her own, she attuned all the light spells to the position of the gas giant, so they subtly changed color throughout the day to mimic the progression of daylight. She also attached an absorbent spell to the lights to reduce the dampness in the tower and keep the fungal growths and mold at bay. Ninian also spent time shoring up the structural integrity of the tower. Rodando had left behind a book on masonry magic, which he had acquired, presumably for the same reasons as Ninian needed the book now, and, tome in hand, Ninian taught herself the recipe for magical mortar and the proper incantations and conjugations for sealing stone together. These incantations required a lot of soul fire, which drained Ninian's willpower, but seeing her handiwork set and dried the next day always gave her a jolt of pride. Even this progress, however, was temporary, because every few days there was a deep thrumming sound from the upper workshop, followed by a loud explosion and a bout of swearing that shook the tower and sent fresh patches of broken stone clattering to the floor. As a result, Ninian became quite practiced at masonry magic. Already a beloved companion, Gossamer became an indispensable assistant. He followed Ninian wherever she went, waiting patiently and quietly nearby until there was a wand to fetch or a dish to lick clean. He had an uncanny ability to locate misplaced masonry trowels, and for the long, lonely mornings was Ninian's silent confidant. When she needed a break or a little one-sided conversation, she popped down to the first-floor sitting room to chat with the glowworm. Thanks to her familiar connection with Gossamer, she could sometimes understand what creatures were thinking or feeling, but the glowworm was a fairly blank slate and not much fun to be around. Plus, the suit of armor in the room gave her the willies, so she often cut these visits short. She felt bad for the creature, but didn't have a plan for how to help it out. She was, of course, also studying portalcraft with Salagrix in the afternoons, as part of the ancient tradition of apprenticeship. Despite her initial enthusiasm, Ninian felt her appetite slowly wane as they delved deeper into the theoretical and mathematical nature of the subject. She sorely missed her classes in creature healing, which had been much more practical and hands-on. This, in combination with Salagrix's meandering lectures, which often dove into complex exceptions and edge cases while Ninian was still struggling with basic concepts, meant that her progress was slow and her attention drifted in the late hours of the afternoon as her lantern light spells dimmed with the setting gas giant. Salagrix also proved to be poor dinner conversation, and she heard the clock tower story several more times over the intervening weeks. Pixie wine toasts were a nightly affair. No matter how delicately she broached the topic of Rodondo, it always sent the old wizard into a daze, and eventually she gave up trying. Similarly, despite multiple daily reminders, Salagrix had not yet returned her data stream device. She was often too tired to press the issue. What's one more day, she thought, day after day. She longed to reach out to her parents and her friend Drusilla, but the longer she went without contact, the less urgent it seemed. What would I even tell them? I cleaned the lower workroom again. I organized the ingredient shelf again. I charged the lantern lights again. I patched the masonry again. I got confused and bored during the portalcraft lecture again. Salagrix got drunk and told the story about the clock tower again. None of it was interesting. Without her data stream device, she spent the last minutes of the day before she passed out from exhaustion in her room cuddling with Gossamer, trying to make sense of her lecture notes, rereading her favorite novel series Almet's Adventures, or doodling in her sketchbook. Sleep came easily after arduous days of work and study. Ninian dreamed of the nearby woods, still unexplored, which beckoned with welcoming branches and encircled the tower in a woody embrace.